Welcome to Season 3 of Under the Sisterhood, Women Making the World Healthier. Our conversations will focus on the themes of women's health and wellness with a new episode every Friday until the end of the year. We will discuss topics ranging from sexual health to mental health while learning from the accomplished practitioners who make women's healthcare possible. This is a podcast to celebrate women and all they do in our role. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, we're getting under the hood with Bethany Corbin, a daughter, sister, women's advocate, and a healthcare innovation Femtech and privacy attorney on a mission to help thought-leading companies revolutionize the global women's health sector. She is the managing partner of a women's health innovation consulting and the co-founder of FemInnovation. Through her company, she partners with emerging businesses at the forefront of healthcare transformation to ensure that they are building robust, scalable, and legally compliant structures ready to lead the industry. Bethany is a recognized thought leader at the intersection of women's health, law, and technology, and was named a top 200 Trailblazing Leader in women's health and Femtech. She is a recipient of the 2023 Champion in Healthcare Award, Global Heal Awards, and was a 2023 recipient of the American Bar Association's On the Rise Top 40 Young Lawyers Award. Her strategic insights have been featured in top news outlets, including Forbes, Fortune, Bustle, NPR, BBC, Cosmopolitan, and Teen Vogue. And she is a guest contributor to Entrepreneur, Med Device Online, and MedCity News. Bethany has testified about the importance of data privacy for reproductive health before the Maryland Cybersecurity Council's Ad Hoc Committee on Consumer Privacy and is an advisory board member for Kisaco Research's Women's Health Innovation Conference Series. Her guest episode on the Hit Like a Girl podcast discussing the impact of the Dobbs decision won a 2022 PowerPress Award.
Oh, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for having me here today. I'm so thrilled to be here and to talk with you and get under the hood.
As I always say, we're in Season 3, Women Making the World Healthier. I love the way you're doing it with health, technology, and law. It's just a wonderful intersection, if you will. So if you could share with our audience, like, what was that moment? When did you begin to think about women's health and want to be doing what you're doing?
I first got interested in healthcare when I was a child. It was around age 7 or 8. My mom actually started having very crazy symptoms. She would collapse. She would be unable to move. She wouldn't be able to move her muscles. She would be gasping for air, and we wouldn't know what was happening. And so we took her to doctor after doctor. They ran test after test, and nobody could figure it out. And so, like many women, my mom experienced gaslighting, and they told her it was all in her head, and they sent her home with nothing. And so these attacks kept happening. We had no answers. My mom had been having every test done in the medical community under the sun. My dad actually had to move to a separate state because we lost my mom's income basically overnight. So he had to take a higher paying job in a separate state. And at age 7 or 8, I became a full-time caregiver for my mother, not knowing every day if she was going to live or die. So that is actually where my journey in healthcare started, was as a 7 or 8-year-old caregiver.
So tell us, did she ultimately get a diagnosis?
She did. So it took 8 years, and we ended up having to go to Mayo Clinic. Of course, this was before telehealth. So my parents had to make it the actual trip up to Rochester, Minnesota. And that'll come full circle when I talk about my own journey later, actually. But she ended up going there and finally got a diagnosis of hypokalemic periodic paralysis, which is something that, very few doctors know about. But it's funny because if you look back in her charts, her tests show, the low potassium levels and the thyroid levels. And that's when doctors were telling her it was all in her head because they couldn't figure out what those low levels meant, even though the answer had been right there. So it actually took going out of state, going to the seasoned professionals to get a diagnosis. And so that happened, gosh, I was about 16 by the time we got that diagnosis.
So talk about what led to that inspiration and your desire to get into health.
So following that, like most people in their teenage years, I thought this is great. I'm going to be a doctor because I want to go and I want to help people. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to make sure that nobody else suffers the way that my mom suffered and the way that I suffered as a caregiver with that uncertainty. The problem, however, which I learned as I went into college, as a bio major, right? I took 4 science classes my first year. The problem was I am actually very, very bad at math and science. And it wasn't something where, my passion could overcompensate for my natural lack of skills. It was going to be something where no matter how hard I studied and tried, I was going to be, kind of that average B student. And for me, I thought, maybe that's not the kind of person that people really want to have as their doctor. Maybe this isn't necessarily the field that I should be going into because it doesn't align with my natural skill sets. It's interesting because at that time as well, so I was about a freshman in college, I had a different experience, totally unrelated to healthcare, but still within kind of the women's rights realm, where I was actually the victim of domestic abuse by my boyfriend at that time. And that is what spurred me to actually go into the legal field because I thought, as somebody who had to navigate the criminal prosecution, right, and actually press charges, right, and you're dealing with the cops, you're dealing with the court system. My first exposure to the court system, and I thought, this was terrible. I had to tell my story so many different times, and of course, this was before the big scandal with the colleges about the way that they were handling these types of domestic and sexual assault cases. So this was right before then. And after that, I said, you know what, this whole process was terrible. I want to go in and I want to help other women through the legal system. And a lot of people think that law is really getting up in the courtroom, right? And you're arguing and you're doing the cross examinations, right? And you're getting those confessions. But a lot of law is actually the background, research, writing, right? Corporate formations, contracts. And those were things I was really, really good at. So that ultimately led me to going into the legal field and kind of the inspiration for becoming a lawyer.
So
Yeah.
you went in, you became a lawyer. What happened from there?
Yes, it's interesting because like so many other people, I lost my path a bit. I went into law school with the idea that I was going to go and, help victims of domestic abuse, right? I had gone into college thinking I was going to be a doctor. And in law school, there are certain subliminal messages that you get, right? And the message that typically comes is if you're in the top of your class, you do law review, you do your big law summer associate positions, and then you go into the big law field, right? And as a first year who did very, very well, I was at the top of my class. That was the route that career officials encouraged me to go. And that was, of course, the route where you're going to come out of law school and make the most money. So during my time in law school, I actually didn't take any healthcare law classes. I didn't do any real criminal law, courses either. And I came out of law school and I did a clerkship at the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Middle District of North Carolina. And I went straight into a big law firm after that in Charlotte doing financial services and litigation. So clearly, right, healthcare law. That's exactly where I've ended up. So that was very unexpected to me. And I came out and I thought, you know what, this is fine. I'm gonna make my 6-figure salary and I'm gonna live and I'll do the meaningful work in my spare time. So during that time, I actually did a lot of pro bono work with Safe Alliance in Charlotte, which was representing domestic violence victims, for their restraining orders. They had a really cool it's a Christmas time and it was a little shop that they set up and people donated so that children and their mothers staying at the shelter could come and get Christmas gifts. And so all of that, were things that I did in my spare time. And I loved it. I loved being, that person who was giving back. Unfortunately, as somebody who also is a perfectionist and pushes herself, I burned out. Doing that, the first year loss, big law associate race, I did burn out. And I had to sit back and think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do next?
I'm really curious. So you had that sort of, I would call the burnout is almost like a wake up call. What happened then?
Yeah, so I had that burnout. I was very fortunate in that I had already, by that point in time, secured a position as a law clerk at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. So I was able to take about 4 months off before I was starting that position and moved to D.C. And so during those 4 months, I, got a bit of myself back. I learned some fun things like jewelry making, and really got into finding myself again. I did that clerkship, which was phenomenal. And I came out of that saying, what am I going to do? Because the last thing I wanted to do was go back into litigation and financial services. That was kind of the mind-numbingly boring things for me that I was not interested in. And so that's when I started to really contemplate and actually got back to my roots in two ways. The first was I love teaching. Ever since I was a small child, I would always play teacher. Most people play house. I was playing teacher and making up fake quizzes about my favorite TV shows. So I would do that. And I thought, you know what? I would love to be a law professor. That would be really cool. So that was kind of thing one that struck me. And then thing two that struck me was I was really interested in healthcare. I still had that passion for healthcare, the healthcare system, what had happened to my mom. And I wanted to find a way to really explore if there was a way to do something in healthcare as an attorney. So I came out of my clerkship and I started applying for jobs. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a healthcare lawyer now. This is great. This is what I want to do. It was very interesting because even though by that point in time I had had about 4 years of legal experience, nobody would hire me as a healthcare lawyer. And I was shocked. I said, you know what? I've got this perfect pedigree, right? I've got, top of my class, big law experience, one of the best clerkships you can have. Why won't you hire me? And it came down to the fact that, and I didn't know this at the time, but healthcare is so nuanced in terms of, the legal aspects to it that people had to be in healthcare law for several years before they had to get hired at the position I was going for. So what I ended up having to do is I did a healthcare LLM, which most people aren't familiar with, but an LLM is basically the next step above a JD. So I did that on the side while I got a job at a large Washington, D.C. law firm, working in their technology and telecommunications practice. And they also had a healthcare practice at that time. And I went to their healthcare partners and I said, I'm really interested in healthcare. I want to do this. I know I'm not in your practice group, but if you have overflow work, please let me know because I'm getting my LLM. And it's really funny. I ended up doing no work, practically zero work for the practice group I was hired with, and did the majority of my work in intellectual property and healthcare at that time.
Did you move immediately into that group, or, what was
Yeah, I pretty much did. I actually started working because there were aspects of my prior experience, and being a good researcher and a good writer that were transferable across practice groups. So I started doing a lot with the intellectual property group, a lot of, motions and background and type of things like that. I couldn't do any of the like super scientific technical stuff. They would bring in other folks for that, but anything that needed, drafting, appeals, that type of thing, I was getting a lot of that work. And then on the healthcare side, I was getting a lot of work on, pharmacy benefit managers, those types of agreements and contracts, managed care, some privacy work, and really dealing with those, very high healthcare organizations that we all know and love in the US today. And that was very exciting. And I fully intended to stay there. And what happened was, at that time, as all of our dreams change over time, I again had this thought of teaching and giving back that way. And so I got what I thought was my dream job. I got to be a law professor at Wake Forest. And so I left Big Law. I went in to be a law professor. I was overseeing the Master of Studies of Law program at Wake. I was teaching in their JD program. I was also teaching in that MSL program on, healthcare compliance and business of healthcare. And I was really enjoying my work. And that was about 2018. And for the first time, I was doing some scholarship research for a totally unrelated article. And I came across the term Femtech for the very first time. And I got obsessed with it. I thought, this is something that's really neat. I've never heard of this term before. It wasn't even coined when I was in law school. It didn't get coined until 2016. And so I started to do a lot of research on this. And I actually wrote an article, a law review article about it. And I got to go and present that article in my research at a different type of law review symposium. And it was, it was a broad symposium on doing, for clinicians not doing harm. But I met some other fantastic people who were also just getting in on this femtech movement at that time. And hearing their perspectives from the clinical and the anthropological perspectives was so fascinating. And it just hit me. It was like, I know I like teaching. I don't like the politics of it. There's a lot in academia that doesn't sit right with me, but maybe that's not where I want to be full term, because this femtech thing, I thought there was so much to it. And you can't really dive into that in the academic realm unless you're talking about it just at the theoretical level. And after that conference, I realized that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be theoretical. I wanted to actually help founders get these products to market. And so I actually left academia, which I never thought I would do.
Understanding the difference and recognizing that you didn't want to live in the world of theory, you wanted to live in the real world of application. And so I'm so excited to hear now. So you saw Femtech, you were excited about this, you got obsessed with it. So what happened from there? You left Wake Forest. What happened?
I did. I left and I went back to my big law firm. And I told them, I said, I really want to explore femtech. I think this could be big. And I think we should have a femtech practice. I know a lot about it. I've researched it. I've kind of been on this cutting edge. I really want to explore this. And they said, okay, that's great. Sounds wonderful. Let's get that going. It was very interesting because the more I started to do in femtech, the more pushback I got from the firm and the partners, right? I was doing things, even if I was working with a different partner who had FTC experience, right? And doing kind of a short podcast on that. I was getting a lot of criticism from the partners, and it was very unexpected. I said, I thought we were trying to build this out. This is, the type of work we need to be doing. What ended up happening is they changed their minds and they said, we want to keep the practice small and focused on managed care and PBM work. And I said, okay, you know what? I think that's fine, because I was enjoying what I was doing. And I thought, maybe femtech's not going to go anywhere. Maybe like so many people think, right? Maybe it's a fad. And so I said, you know what? Maybe I can just be happy being, this big law associate, working my way up the ladder. I was next in line for partner. And so I thought, fine, you know what? Maybe I just give that up. I don't know if it was fate that intervened or what. But in, the COVID hit, right, the height of, 2021, I actually had my own women's health diagnosis, and it was very unexpected. I had gone in for a physical, my annual physical. I had, talked my way out of the blood draw because I didn't want to know what my, cholesterol was doing. And I was at the very end, and she said, "Oh, we haven't done your pelvic exam yet." So I lie back down, I'm like 2 minutes from getting out of there. And she pushes on my stomach, and my doctor kind of looks at me funny and she goes, "Are you pregnant?" And I laugh. I'm like, there's zero chance I am pregnant. And she kind of looks at me funny again, and she goes and she gets a tape measure and she starts measuring across my stomach. And I can just, the dots start to connect in my head. Like, okay, she's asking me if I'm pregnant. She's measuring, something's in there. And it turned out I had a very large pelvic mass. I got diagnosed that day with a pelvic mass. I had to go through emergency OB/GYN appointments that day, emergency testing, blood work, had elevated blood levels. And they were pretty sure after all the testing that occurred that it was, benign fibroids. But they were so large that I was the equivalent of 6 months pregnant, and they were crushing my organs. So these things had to come out. And, during that time, I really got thrust into being a patient instead of somebody who was, advocating from the outside about healthcare. I now had to, transverse this world that my mom had to go through before, and I knew very little about from the patient side. And it was A, very daunting, and B, I did all of this research on fibroids, and I read that, 80% of women are going to have fibroids in their lifetime. And so when I went to my OB/GYN after that and doing that research to talk about my options, I said, okay, so 80% of women have this. What pill do we take? What pill, or is there, like a laser treatment that we do, or how, what happens next? And she kind of laughed at me and she said, no, 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 right? There's no pill. The only cure is a full hysterectomy. And for you, you have to have abdominal surgery to get yours out. That's your only option because they're so big. And for me, I was reading every single book I could get my hands on fibroids, and I was actually very thankful for the COVID pandemic pushing us into telehealth. And this is kind of where it comes full circle, but I wanted a second opinion because my clinician here had said that I was going to have open abdominal surgery because they were so large. And so I scheduled a virtual telehealth, visit with Mayo Clinic in Rochester. And I got on there and I was talking to the person who had written one of the fibroid books, 20 years ago. And so I talked with her. She put me in touch with her recommended surgeon who, thought he could get these out laparoscopically. And so I ended up going to Mayo Clinic to have my surgery.
I assume if it was laparoscopy, you didn't have to have the hysterectomy, right?
Yeah, so I didn't. And it was interesting, right? Because I had a lot of experiences, obviously, with my mom with medical gaslighting. I kind of had the opposite experience. I had here in Charlotte, I had two great female clinicians who took this very seriously and didn't dismiss anything. And then whenever I was at the Mayo Clinic, this doctor was very much until the recovery period, he was very, very skilled, very hands-on, very much able to, and recommending against hysterectomy even, and saying, what, you should preserve your options at this point in time. So that was really nice because a lot of clinicians do recommend hysterectomy in those circumstances, and now I get monitored. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah, some of them are growing back, some of them have doubled in size. They're still small. So who knows what the future will bring, but I have a great care team and that's fantastic. What is interesting though, so after my surgery, um, and I've read this is one of the most, top 10 most painful procedures to have. It was a myomectomy, which is what I had. And no joke, it was terrible. And I was begging for more pain pills. I got my surgery was 7 hours, which is longer than a heart transplant that's routine. And I got 2 days of opioids after that surgery, and recovery is 6 weeks. And my mom actually, was full circle. She was there with me, and she called the doctor and his on-call residence, and she was begging for more pills for me. And they said, that shouldn't hurt that bad. She shouldn't need more pills than that. So it was incredibly painful. I came back here, 6 weeks later, did my follow-up with my OBGYN here, and I told her kind of what had happened on the pain side. And she was just flabbergasted. She said, you know what, you should have had a minimum of 2 weeks of opioids for what you went through. So that was interesting to kind of see that male-female disconnect there and minimization of the pain.
It's not just as being a woman, it's just like you don't know unless you haven't experienced it. So I'm really sorry that you had to experience that, but I'm really happy that you did get that other side of it so that you're managing it now. So
Yeah,
you went through this health scare, if you will,
yeah,
journey. This is part of your journey now.
yeah.
And how did that inspire where you are today? So like what took place? You finished the surgery, you're recovering, and what, like, you clearly had to get started again. Did you go back to the same firm? Like, what did you do next?
Yeah, it was interesting because I had to deal with a lot of fear, that came along with having a surgery. I hadn't had a surgery since I was 10. And so that was something as well that, as you're navigating that journey, you're really, for me, I had to find meaning and purpose in it in order to kind of push past that fear. So for me, I had to take a step back and say, what is this trying to teach me? It's taught me that I've been too much stress on my body. I've neglected myself in favor of work and being a big law associate. That's got to change. And two, again, this is pushing me towards women's rights. It's pushing me towards healthcare. And I think honestly, what it was saying to me was if you are not going into femtech or women's health, you're missing a big opportunity for why you were put here on earth, and what you could potentially do with your life. So I went back to the big law firm and I ended up resigning and I ended up going to a smaller law firm that did digital health innovation and learned a lot there. Started to, see some fibroids come back. We had a lot of family health issues going on at that time. And what I ended up having to do was step away. And I did it with a thought that I'm going to take, a couple of years off, maybe see what I'm supposed to be doing, try and figure out this path. Um, unexpectedly lasted 5 weeks and really started, to get a lot of interest and contacts from femtech companies needing legal assistance. And that was one of the things that I had really seen at my prior law firms was the complete lack of resources and affordable, right, guides and document templates for these startup founders. And that was a huge gap. And it was funny because when I had that, those 5 weeks of downtime to really think, okay, how can I keep making a difference in this space? This really popped up for me. And I said, you know what? This is the space that I need to be in. So from that, we created Women's Health Innovation Consulting, where we do provide lower cost legal advice to femtech and women's health founders. We're the first law firm in the US that focuses exclusively on women's digital health innovation. And then I also am the co-founder and CEO of FemInnovation, which has a couple different offerings. The first is we have a FemInnovator community to try to bring together all the different actors in women's healthcare, get them together, get them talking. We're also trying to to teach clinicians about this industry through our Femtech Medical Consultant Certificate, and we're trying to get patients involved through our Patient Advocacy Council to get them to give feedback to founders on these products so that we're incorporating their voice and their journey and their experiences in the hopes that nobody has to go through what so many of us have gone through.
I think you're onto something really big. And I think to your point of creating that consultancy that supports these early stage or these startups, as well, I think coming at it from a woman's perspective, as a woman doing it for women, I think that's really powerful. So I'd love to hear from that perspective, to your point of full circle. At 8 years old, you became a caregiver. Now here you are running this company, FemInnovation, as well as your consultancy. As a woman doing this in women's health, tell me what you think about bringing those aspects together.
I love that it's come full circle, honestly. It's kind of the feeling of you finally got to where you were meant to be. And yes, right, you had a lot of pivots along the way. Yeah, it took a lot of different, trial and error to find what you felt, most passionate about. And that's kind of the thing too, is I don't regret any of those prior experiences that I had because they ultimately led me here today. And that's the thing too, for instance, being a law professor, I feel like if I hadn't tried that, I would always be wondering and always thinking, oh, I should have been a law professor, right? I should have done that. Having done it and realized, okay, maybe that's not the best fit for me right now. It's nice because you can kind of finally close that chapter and put it behind you. And so I love, being a woman working with primarily female founders. There are some male founders in the femtech industry that I work with, and they're fantastic as well. But being able to, kind of have this common understanding and common language where you all, have had similar health experiences, even if they're not identical, right? We all go, for instance, for mammograms, right? We're all going to go through menopause. And so we have that shared identity and the shared ability to kind of speak across that language and encourage each other to be more open and more vulnerable and to discuss our pain points and our challenges. Because, sometimes it's easy in the entrepreneurship journey to think that everyone's highlight reel is what's happening in their business building. And, we try to keep it very real where, for instance, if I'm having a bad week or a bad day, I'm open about that in our community so that others know, right, that this isn't something that just magically sprung out of the ground and was successful on its, first day. So I love being a woman in this field, having those experiences and being able to share them with others, because I think it makes us a much more powerful community that way.
So you've just launched Femivation. Tell us how it's going and what you're hoping for in the near and longer term future.
So we just launched FemInnovation. We're so thrilled because we envision it really as being a one-stop ecosystem for the women's health community, right? So a place where founders, clinicians, scientists, researchers, patient advocates can come together and work together to solve a lot of those pain points and challenges and gaps that we have in women's healthcare today, but doing it in a way that's going to make it clinically meaningful and clinically usable, because that's another huge gap that we've identified is this huge disconnect between a lot of the femtech founders creating these devices and the clinicians who are working with women's healthcare, right? They're working with patients on a daily basis, and most of them have never even heard of femtech. right? Let alone been involved in this. And you do look at the studies and you see the, lack of clinical accuracy and clinical data. And so that's a huge gap area that we're also trying to bridge. So I think for us, so far our launch has been fantastic. We have our first group of Femtech medical consultant certificates going through the program. So we've got 11 individuals in our first cohort there. We wanted to cap it at 10 and we ended up with one more. So
That's
and that was perfect. We sold out on that. And we offer that at least 3 times a year. And then, the other thing is we've started to get some founder interest in our community as well for accessing those resources. So we've got some great founders on there. But what I would say, one of the things that we are really proud of and where we're also looking to kind of go in the future is partnerships and collaboration. So there's a lot of other women's health communities out there, but nobody is talking to each other, right? Nobody is integrating and trying to find these ways to work with each other in a way that's going to promote the entire women's health system. And that's what we want to do. So we prize partnerships and collaboration as our foundation. And we want to make sure that our founders and clinicians get access to all of these great resources. So we are in the process of building a lot of really cool collaborations with organizations and individual subject matter experts. So for instance, one of the collaborations that we have has to deal with health equity. That's something that we firmly believe has to be embedded in Femtech products. So for anyone who joins our community, we offer them a free 30-minute health equity consultation with one of our amazing health equity consultants. So they can learn when they should be thinking about a health equity and how to operationalize that. We're doing something similar on the social determinants of health side. We're also working with experts on go-to-market strategies, right? Who are going to give those free 30-minute consults to our founders as well to help them strategize. So a lot of really cool things like that. And that's where I want to see us go in the future, is to have hundreds of these types of collaborations and partnerships, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We know there's great resources already out there, and we want to partner to give our members access to them where they might not otherwise know about them, or get them more affordable access, right? If they can't, afford it on their own. So I think those collaborations and partnerships are key for us. And then looking for sponsors as well to sponsor the memberships for these founders so that it's very low cost to them, because we don't want this to be a barrier to entry. And we're committed to working with everyone, but we also need, the buy-in from the higher up organizations that are, kind of controlling healthcare right now. So that's also something that's on our radar for the next 6 to 12 months.
So, Bethany, we're coming to a close. I'd love for you. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm just so, honored to be here having it with you. I want you to give a message to women around the world, and women of all ages, of all backgrounds, and of all cultures. What do you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I would like to leave in my parting message. The first is, unfortunately, we're all going to have those really uncomfortable experiences, or the experiences that really scare us. For me, it was being a caregiver to my mom, right? Thinking she was going to die all the time, navigating my own health journey, right? Being a victim of domestic violence. And what I eventually learned was, we've got to look at what that's teaching us. We've got to look at what positive we can pull from each of those experiences that we've had. Is there a common thread? Is there a way, or, a hint of where this might be trying to lead us and take us? And if so, do we have the confidence and the power to believe in ourselves enough to make that leap? And I will say, for me, it was scary, right? I was leaving a very high 6-figure paying job in big law to step away and take half of the salary at a smaller law firm. And that was terrifying to me. The other piece of advice that kind of goes hand in hand with that is, if you are considering something like that, don't be afraid to leave your ego at the door, because that was a major thing for me, right? I had to get over the fact that this was the career you were supposed to have in law, right? I was one step away from being the law partner that everybody wanted to be. And for me, having to step back and say, that's fantastic, but that's not the right path for me. I have to leave my ego at the door, and I have to go try something new where, yeah, maybe people are going to say, have you lost your mind, Bethany? Right? Why did you do this? What are you thinking? And I knew that there were going to be people saying that, even, relatives, wondering what I was doing. And I had to tune that out and I had to say, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks I'm doing right now. It matters what I feel I need to be doing, what I've learned from these different experiences that I've had, and how I might use that to make one person's life better, right? Because if I can leave having made a difference in one person's life, right, or having advised a company that's then able to take that advice and build a product that changes one person's life, that's enough for me. And I feel like I get to do that every single day. So don't be afraid to find those common threads, to just take time and see what those experiences are teaching you, and to ultimately leave your ego at the door and think, is this for me, right? If I leave everything else out and I drown out all the other noise, is this going to be where I want to be for the next, 6, 12, 20 years, right? Is this going to be the path I think I want to take? And don't be afraid to pivot if it's not.
And I'm really struck by when you first started, it was each thing happening. And the one thing I want to say about it as well, Bethany, in the process of these years of your life going through this journey, you've been an exceptional role model, because sharing this now with women around the world, you're showing them that you can pivot multiple times and be hugely successful at each phase, but on your mission to find the things that you're more and more passionate. So you're role modeling that it's okay. Do the hard work, do the work, show up, give it a try. And if it doesn't work, yeah, I did that and I'm good with that, and move on. So congratulations on all the amazing work you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing your incredible life story.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. This has been phenomenal, and truly, truly grateful to be here.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.